All right, guys, how you doing? Um, Not an ideal situation for everybody, but we're going to make the best of it if we can. All right. There's lots of different things that we're going to talk about. This is kind of like an overview of the course, so to speak, right here. Characteristics of life. It's not really a unit. But we're going to treat it kind of like an introduction or a prologue to the course. All right. So first, let's take a look. All right, we've got a little pentagon here, and it lists the 5 kingdoms on the outside. Now, the top 2, I don't think we need to spend much. If I told you to list some animals in there, you could throw dog, cat, whatever, bird. Okay, plants, tree, tomato, grass, whatever. You can do those things. All right. The bottom 3 are ones that a lot of people struggle with. Okay, so we've got fungi. And what I want you guys to remember, and when we talk about fungi, is mostly yeast and mold, right? And mushrooms too. But the big 2 are yeast and mold. All right. Yeast. Think of yeast as in what makes bread rise. Yeast and bread. It's a living organism, right? And mold. I'm sure that most of you have pulled things out of your refrigerator that have been in there too long, and you know what I'm talking about when I say mold. All right. The 3 big protists that I want you to keep track or keep in mind are the algae, the amoeba, and the paramecium. All right. And these are what are called eukaryotic organisms. All right. Eukaryotic, true. Think true. It rhymes. Okay. What is the true? True nucleus. Okay. So protists have a nucleus. All right. And then finally we have Monera. Moneras are bacteria are moneras, and they are what are called prokaryotic. No. It rhymes also. No nucleus. Okay, so keep that in mind. Those are the kind of the things we're going to talk about this year. We're going to talk about the 5 kingdoms and how everything's kind of related to everything else. You can see here that this is actually a video. All right, I will link to the video on bacteria so that you can watch that separately. I'm not going to show it right here, okay? All right, so let's start. What's an organism? Well, it's any individual living thing. All right, so that's kind of like when we talk about organisms, how many organisms are on the planet, or how many different species, organisms within species. An organism is any individual living thing. All right. We know that there are many, many, many different kinds of organisms out there. All right. There's a very large diversity. However, within that large group of organisms, there are some common characteristics. Okay, even though there's all kinds of different ones out there, we all kind of share a few common characteristics. All right. First of all, organisms are composed of cells. All right, you are made up of cells. I'm made up of cells. We're all made up of cells. All right, we're all individual organisms, but we are each made up of multiple cells. And we'll talk about the difference between single cell and multi-cell. All right, but for now, just keep in mind that we're all made up of cells. All right. Something else that all organisms do, they all release energy during cellular respiration. Okay, that is the purpose of respiration, is for the release of energy for that organism. All right, makes things go. We all undergo growth over our lifespan. All right. Meaning that not only do we increase in the number of cells as we develop, but we get bigger. All right. And that happens for all organisms. Okay. They all undergo this particular life process. All right. Growth. And you can see, if I move this a little bit here, you can see this little diagram down here. All right. And we'll talk about what all these words mean and everything, but Zygote is essentially a fertilized egg cell. All right. And then throughout its lifetime, it divides and grows. So we get more cells and more cells and more cells until eventually we end up with a full organism. Okay. And again, we're going to talk about all these different processes in the middle here. We're not going to hit on them right now. All right. Just understand that from the beginning to the organism, we all go through these processes. Okay. We all undergo development. There are changes that take place in organisms from the time they're born to when they die. Right? We develop through time. There are different changes throughout different our lifespan, right? Different phases to our life cycle. Right? You can see in the diagram here, we've got the sperm and the egg. We've got the tadpole developing through time. You can see legs developing, getting bigger, and then all of a sudden you've got a frog. All right? That is development through a process, okay? From the beginning to the end. All organisms do this. Okay? All right, organisms produce offspring through the process of reproduction. In order to make more of something, they have to reproduce. And there are different ways that reproduction occurs. And not everything reproduces the same way. We'll talk about that too. All right. Keep in mind that reproduction is the only process that is essential for survival of the species, but not for the individual itself. What that means is I don't have to have children in order to survive. But humans as a species need to have children in order to continue the species. All right. So individual organisms don't necessarily have to reproduce in order for them to survive. But as a whole, the species, in order for it to survive, there has to be reproduction within the species. Okay? Organisms obtain materials needed for energy and growth from the environment through the process of ingestion. Ingestion is taking in food into the organism so that you can use it for energy, for growth processes, for all the things that we need to do throughout our life. Okay? We ingest things. Okay? For us, we eat a cheeseburger or whatever. Okay? And again, different things ingest in different ways. Organisms break down large molecules through what's called digestion, and then we reassemble them through what's called synthesis. All right? So if you look, this is our little kind of our internal organs here. You can see after you eat something, it'll follow a path, and throughout the path that it follows, it slowly gets broken down into smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller pieces so that it can be used by the body, all right, until eventually we get rid of the waste, all right? We also can create things that we need through what's called synthesis, all right? To synthesize something means to make something from other things. So if you look in this picture, we've got some hydrogens in the blue, we've got some oxygens in the red. When we combine them together, you guys know that hydrogen and oxygen makes water. Right? So we synthesize things that we can use from smaller things that we can't necessarily use, or we need to use them for something else. All right? So again, this is just another process that organisms go through. All right? Organisms also undergo the life process of transportation. Okay? Transportation is how materials in the body are taken in and moved around, distributed throughout the body so they can be used. All right. If you think about a plant, it has roots. It takes water in through the roots and then moves it up through the stalk and the stems and the leaves so it can be used. Okay, that's called transportation. Right? When we breathe in oxygen, our blood becomes oxygenated. That material can then go around our body and it can be used for the different processes that we go through. All right? We eliminate waste. Organisms eliminate waste through what's called excretion. Okay? When you get rid of the stuff that you don't need anymore, you excrete it. Okay? And it can be either liquid waste or it can be solid waste. There are different ways that can happen too. All right? All right, by responding to changes in the environment, organisms maintain a stable internal environment. All right? We like things to be pretty on an even keel. Organisms don't like a big change in their environment. Right? They like to keep what's called homeostasis. And again, I'll link a little video for that so you can kind of see what I'm talking about here. But what happens is when there's a little change in the environment that we don't like or that we're not used to, or whatever, the body responds and adjusts itself. Right? It wants to stay kind of even. I equate it to kind of like riding a bicycle. If you're riding a bicycle and you got your hands on the handlebars, you're not just going to hold straight and start pedaling. You're making tiny little changes. Right? Tiny little changes in order to maintain that straight path. Now, if you actually were to map out the path that you're taking in the bicycle, it's not a perfectly straight path. There's tiny little curves in the line, but overall you're going in a straight line. All right. Another phrase that we use in terms of that is something called dynamic equilibrium. Equilibrium means everything wants to stay the same, and dynamic means things are always constantly changing a little bit. So things adjust a little bit, but overall they stay kind of the same. All right. Here's an example. Here's a good example. I'll get this out of the way here. All right, body temperature is a great example. Okay, so let's say you go out for a run. All right. When you start running, your metabolism speeds up, your heart rate speeds up, your breathing speeds up, you get warmer, your temperature goes up. All right. If you look at your body temperature as you're running, you get hotter. Your body temperature goes up. You start to sweat, that kind of thing. All right. When that happens, the sweating is your body's mechanism for cooling off. All right. And so when your body starts to sweat, you start to cool off, and you can see how the line drops down. Your temperature goes down. But if your temperature gets too low, your body's not happy there either. And so you start to shiver. Okay. Shivering is the way that your body is trying to generate heat because it's too cold. And so it goes up. All right. And you can see over time that there are changes where your body's heating up, and then your body creates a mechanism for cooling down. But if it cools down too much, you heat up again, and then you cool down, then you heat up. But overall, you can see it's maintaining a fairly normal, straight, horizontal line. Yes, your actual body temperature is going up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down when you're doing things like exercising and stuff like that. But the overall effect is that it tries to maintain, or does maintain, a fairly even level temperature, which is what your body needs in order to function properly. All right. All these things that organisms go through, all the chemical activities, that's what's referred to as the body's metabolism. You may have heard some people say, they have a fast metabolism, they have a slow metabolism, whatever. That's all the activity, all the chemical activity that's inside your body. And all the different things that go on, all the processes that go on, that's your metabolism. All right. So again, that was just a little introduction. All right. All those different things in there we're gonna talk about them all in much greater detail over the course of the school year. So I just wanted to say hey, and we'll see you on the next video.